Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Movie Goodness, where we examine life through cinema here on the KB Radio Network. I am your host, Kevin Reed, and once again, feels like I just did a tribute episode just a couple of days ago with the late, great George Foreman, who passed away, can't remember the date, but a couple of weeks ago. Well, we have to come right back around and discuss another tough pill to swallow, and that is the passing of the great Val Kilmer, who passed away at the age of 65 years old on April Fool's Day, April the 1st of this year. And it wasn't a joke. It actually took place. Oh man, this one cut deep. It felt like and you normally say that for every passing. But this one did really cut deep with me because I'm a huge Val Kilmer fan. I love Val Kilmer. For some strange reason, I've always connected to Val Kilmer. I guess because I grew up in an era where he just took off. I remember watching him in Top Secret and Real Genius and Top Gun and all that stuff in the 80s and going into the 90s, where we got to see him as Batman. We got to see him in Tombstone and all of these other good properties. And he's just been a part of my life. And just recently, a couple of years ago, in his final role, reprising the role as Iceman in Top Gun Maverick. And, that scene hits different now that he appeared in that film. But he's just been a part of my life, my whole life, watching him in these films. And you always say, man, wish would have gave him his flowers while he was alive. And you really do. I wish he would have got more recognition for all the work he did throughout his career, because he did some exceptional work. I know that there's been talks about how difficult he was on certain sets that he worked on, and got into it with directors and so forth and so on. I don't know about it. I wasn't there. Can I believe it? Yeah, because all actors do. All actors are difficult on set because they have a vision. They're artists, and there's going to be artistic liberties taking and contrasting thoughts on sets. The director have a certain vision, but the actors have a different vision on how that character reacts to motivations and things of that nature in the film. So all actors have that little problem. So I never knocked him for that. Whatever, because all actors do that. It's just, for him, everybody always talked about that. I've been hearing that for years. I remember when Batman Forever came out in 1995, and it was reports on how difficult he was with Joel Schumacher. That's why he didn't return for Batman and Robin, which in his case was a blessing in disguise. That was a blessing. But he got into it with him. He got into it with it was another film. I can't remember off the top of my head. But the man had some despite all that, he had some awesome performances. He was, arguably one of the most versatile actors of his era. And I don't think is talked about enough. In honor of Val Kilmer and his career, we're going to go over what I feel are the top 10 Val Kilmer films / performances. Now, when we go through this list, some of the films aren't, I would say, top 10 quality films, but his performance was my favorite. I loved his performance, or it has sentimental value, to be 100% honest with you. Nostalgic value that I just can't let go. That will always be ingrained in my skull when it comes to Val Kilmer. And so we're going to count down from 10 to 1. Uh, what I feel are the greatest Val Kilmer performances and films. Val Kilmer, just to go over a quick little bio of him. He was born on December the 31st, 1959. He passed away tragically April the 1st, 2025. He was an actor. He initially started off as a stage actor, but later found fame as a leading man in film in a wide variety of genres. It's comedies, dramas, action adventure, westerns, historical films, crime dramas, science fiction films, and fantasy films as well. He did them all. He touched every genre there was. Films in which Kilmer appeared grossed more than $3.8 billion worldwide. In 1992, famous film critic Roger Ebert remarked, "If there is an award for the most unsung leading man in his generation, Val Kilmer should get it." And I 100% agree with Roger Ebert. That's the dude was just when he was a part of a film, you knew that it was something. In his prime, it was going to be something, and he was going to give it. You know, did Val Kilmer mail in some performances like later on in his? He did. It was some movies that you could clearly see he just took on for a paycheck or whatever. But for the most part, and those are few, but for the most part, Val Kilmer brought it, and he just had a gravitas about himself when he was on screen. Good looking, funny, charismatic. He had it all. He checked all of the boxes. And so let's dive into this list. Let's dive into the top 10. But before we get to the top 10, I do have some honorable mentions that just couldn't make the top 10. And I molded over these for a minute. And at some point during the editing of this list, these three films were in the top 10, but I had to bump them for this or bump them for that. And, so I just made a separate list for honorable mentions, and they deserve to be mentioned honorably. My first honorable mention for Val Kilmer films is The Ghost in the Darkness. This film, I remember this film vividly. It came out, I believe, the same weekend as The Long Kiss Goodnight. Another, I guess you could say, guilty pleasure of mine. One of my favorite films from Rennie Harlin and Gina Davis, and Samuel L. Jackson is in that movie. But that same weekend, these studios decided to release these two movies at the same time. And The Ghost in the Darkness was a movie that I was super excited about because Val Kilmer and Michael Douglas was a part of that cast, about these two man-eating lions attacking these bridge workers or builders in Africa. And it's based on a true story. These are actual lions that did this. Actually, those lions, I believe they killed the lions in real life, and they're in a museum somewhere. I can't remember where, but I remember when the movie came out, I did a lot of research on it because the movie was intriguing. I actually enjoyed the movie, and I enjoyed Val Kilmer in it. Very exciting film. Some real cool action. I just loved it. I love the lions in it, because those lions were not to be messed with. And the added fact that it was a true story, it just made it that much more intriguing. And so, yes, The Ghost in the Darkness is on my honorable mention list. Also on that list, which I know probably going to have people pulling their hair out because it's not in my top 10, but I am mentioning it. So give me some credit. It's The Doors. And the reason The Doors didn't crack the top 10, I'm not a Doors guy. The band and Jim Morrison, I don't know anything about it. I've seen the movie and I know a little bit about it, doing a little research on it around the time that movie came out, because I didn't know anything about The Doors, but I knew about Val Kilmer and I wanted to see him. And I always found it funny. If you look at a picture of Jim Morrison and a picture of Val Kilmer, especially around the time that film was made, they look identical. They look like the same person. And it was a no-brainer to cast him, I suppose. Oliver Stone, who directed that movie, but he was phenomenal. He was phenomenal in that movie. Uh, it don't crack the top 10 because I don't know anything about the Doors, so I don't know how accurate or inaccurate it is. So I can't give it too much credit. But I can honestly say Val Kilmer did a phenomenal job. I believe he was nominated for an Academy Award for his performance as Jim Morrison. And so it do deserve some recognition. It just didn't crack my top 10. My last honorable mention, and honestly, this was a tough cut. I mean, I almost cried when I was writing this list down because I had to take it out of the top 10 because this movie means so much to me. It means so much to me. And I love this adaptation of the Ten Commandments. Yes, it is the animated film, The Prince of Egypt. I I still love that movie. I mean, so good, so good. And Val Kilmer, he provided the voice of Moses in that film, as well as God. He did the voice of God as well. And he was so good. His voiceover work was so good as Moses. I mean, you wouldn't know it was Val Kilmer until you see the credits. That's how good he was as Moses. I believed him as Moses in that film. But that film is beautifully animated, a beautiful story. Even if you're not a quote unquote religious person, it's still a good movie because it tells the story of these two brothers, Moses and Pharaoh. And that's what the focus was. But it's set in this time of Exodus, and it's just done well. I really enjoyed the Prince of Egypt, but it just didn't get there. And at one point it was ranked really high on the list. It was really high in the top 10 for Val Kilmer, but ultimately I had to go with other films. The way I justified it was he just provided the voice, so that's how I justified it in my mind. But it do deserve an honorable mention here on this list. So with that out the way, let's hop into our 10 Val Kilmer films, which I feel are his best films, his best performances. A couple of these films I wouldn't say were his best film, but he had a awesome performance in it, and vice versa. Sometimes the performance was all right, but the film was great, or he wasn't the focal point, but the film was great. And so, as you could tell, I had a tough time putting this list together, trying to justify in my head why this is at 7 and this is at 2 and this is at, so, but ultimately I had fun doing it because I got to revisit Val Kilmer and all of the wonderful work that he's done. If he didn't do wonderful work, I wouldn't be caring about a list. This wouldn't be a list. The mere fact that I had to make room for extra films just goes to show you how awesome of an actor and performer that he was. And so let's jump into the top 10 Val Kilmer films / performances at number 10. And yes, it's at number 10. Some may say it should have been an honorable mention. Some may say it shouldn't even be mentioned at all, but doggone it, I'm a Batman fan. And at number 10, it is Batman Forever. Val Kilmer portrayal of Bruce Wayne, aka Batman, in that film. No, it's not my favorite Batman film, but it was better than Batman and Robin, that's for certain. But what I enjoyed about that movie, and what a lot of people don't give credit to Val Kilmer for, Val Kilmer is one of the best Bruce Waynes we have ever gotten in live action. One of the absolute best. Now, Batman's not so much. Let's call a spade here. He was not the best Batman, but he was the best Bruce Wayne. That's why I loved his portrayal here. That's why it's in my top 10. he was a perfect Bruce Wayne. Um, the problem with his performance, he was the same. He didn't switch it up. He didn't switch up his voice. He didn't switch up his speech patterns or nothing when he had the cape and the cowl on. So that's what really hurt the film. You know how even Robert Pattinson switched it up. Christian Bale switched it up. Ben Affleck switched it up. You know, Michael Keaton switched it up, but he didn't. And to be fair, neither did George Clooney. You know, so those two actors did not switch up their personas when they put on the bat suit. But Val Kilmer as Bruce Wayne was flawless. He honestly was the best depiction of a live action Bruce Wayne that I've seen on screen, and that includes every actor I just named. If you don't believe me, if you don't agree, go watch it again. Go watch Batman Forever again, and you would get a greater appreciation how he approached Bruce Wayne. And so Batman Forever is number 10 on the top 10 Val Kilmer films. At number 9 is Top Secret. Top Secret was the first film of his, and it was the first time I ever seen him in a film, of course, because that was his first film, duh. But it was the first time I was exposed to Val Kilmer, and it was hilarious. These are from the same filmmakers that gave us Airplane, and later on they gave us the Naked Gun series and all this here. Top Secret is this slapball, silly, just ridiculous movie, and Val Kilmer was hilarious in this movie. I mean, downright hilarious. I thought he was a comedic actor at this point. You know, it's early on in his career, because later on he was in other comedies as well, which may end up on this list. But he had just a funny vibe about him, this deadpan delivery that it just worked for that film. And it helps that he was in the hands of these filmmakers who basically invented this subgenre of comedy where it's just screwball slapstick is a joke in every frame of film, you know, and it just came off good. And I think of that era when we got films like this, like Airplane and all this here, nobody talks about Top Secret, but Top Secret is hilarious. It is so funny, and it deserves to be in the top 10. That's why I'm putting it at number 9. Coming in at number 8, and get ready to sharpen up your pitchforks, because I know a lot of people going to be like, what? Number 8? Are you serious? This guy is a buffoon. Well, fine, that's fine, but just remember, this is my list. This is my list. At number 8, Willow. I loved Willow growing up. I actually adore Willow. Hated the series that came on Disney Plus. What, that was last year or the year before last, whenever it was. But it was horrible. But I loved the what was that, 1988 or maybe 87, whenever Willow came out. I love that movie, and Val Kilmer was amazing in this movie. I mean, amazing. And he had everything going in this film. He was funny. The action, the dramatic beats, all of that. He had to put it all into Willow, and he just nailed it. It was so good. He was so good. He was like a swashbuckling Han Solo, if you will. You know, his attitude, his little cocky, smug attitude of his. I don't know, man. It's one of my favorites. And then, you know, thinking it through, I probably do have it too low. I probably do have it too low, but I'm gonna stick with it. I'm gonna commit to it. Is at number 8, but it is phenomenal. It is a phenomenal performance for a phenomenal film. That was directed by Ron Howard. But yeah, Willow, lands at number 8. Coming in at number 7, just above it, was a movie that, man, I still to this day love this film. To this day. And I think this movie is like, what, 30 years old? Maybe 40. Yeah, it came out in 85. It's 40 years old. And I can't get enough of it. This is one of the first movies I remember going to the theater to see. I'm not saying this is the first movie I went to go see in the theater, but in my feebled mind, I vaguely remember going with my sisters to go see Real Genius in the theaters. Actually, my brother. Or it could have been all four of us. I'm not sure. But anywho's, Real Genius. I love this movie. This is a true cheesy 80s film to the core. It is dated as all get out, but I love it. And I loved Val Kilmer in it. Val Kilmer had the swagger of who can I compare him to? It was like Judd Nelson's character in The Breakfast Club. The John Bender character, but without the criminal element. But he was a genius, you know what I'm saying? He was super smart, super intelligent, but never took himself seriously, never took any situation seriously. But what stands out in that film, in his performance, and where as a young 6-year-old, 7-year-old, however old I was when I saw this movie first, what clicked in my mind was that this dude can act. Yes, he was silly and goofy and, not really taking things seriously and all this here. But there was a scene when he switched, when things got serious, and it was just the look on his face, the way he carried himself, after that. And the disappointment, the hurt, the betrayal in his face. And this was a comedy. And he was acting his behind off in this little comedy film. And to this day, it's one of the things that sticks out. Not all of the jokes, not all of the beats with the popcorn that filled up the house at the end because they took over the satellite and all this here. No, it was his turn, his facial expression, him emoting when he was betrayed by his professor. And it was like, I don't know, man. I knew he was special. And yes, I was young. Yes, I could barely pee standing up around that time, but I remembered that, and it stuck with me my entire life. And he made me a fan from that moment on. And so coming in at number 7 was Real Genius. Coming in at number 6 was a sleeper for me. I mean, a sleeper. A movie that had no business being as good as it is. A movie that had no business being as funny as it was, as intriguing as it was, as entertaining as it was, and contained two of the best performances from two actors that at this point, at this stage of their careers, I think Hollywood and everybody else had pretty much given up on them, but they turned out two of the best performances in this film. It is none other than Shane Black's Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. I love this movie. I watch this movie at least twice a year. Since its release, I've watched this movie ad nauseum. And for some strange reason, it's one of my top Val Kilmer performances. It's because he plays this gay private eye and Gay Perry. And he is so funny. Val Kilmer, I mentioned he was in Top Secret. I mentioned he was in Real Genius. These are comedy movies, yes. But I have never laughed so hard from a Val Kilmer performance than I did in Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. This film was written and directed by Shane Black. Shane Black has given us some gems throughout our time here on Earth. The Lethal Weapon films, the Last Boy Scout, Iron Man 3, and so on and so forth. He's given us some gangster ones. Even a film that I mentioned earlier, The Long Kiss Goodnight. He wrote that film. So he has given us some really good films. And in this film, he paired Val Kilmer with Robert Downey Jr., who gave a career defying role, a career saving role. Because remember, at this point, Robert Downey Jr. was done. This is before Iron Man, people. This is before he took off to the stratosphere and ended up winning an Academy Award for Oppenheimer. If it wasn't for Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, none of that would have happened. None of this would have, no Tony Stark, no Oppenheimer Academy Award, no Doomsday Avengers, none of that. And so we owe all of this to Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. Val Kilmer was hilarious in this movie. I mean, there were points in this film where he was stolen because Val Kilmer wasn't in a lot. This movie was a Robert Downey Jr. vehicle. He was the star. Val Kilmer was just there. It's kind of positioned as a buddy cop film, but it really ain't. They're in it a lot together, but not the whole film together. Robert Downey Jr. had to carry this film mostly, but when Val was on screen, it was hilarious, man. It was hilarious. I loved his role in this movie, and this is one of the films that, quite honestly, when I think back on, this is the one. Well, there's a few of them, but this is one of the films that I probably shed a tear for because of the lasting impression that he left. Yeah, man. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang comes in at number 6 of the top 10 Val Kilmer films. Coming in at number 5 is the original Top Gun. Top Gun, Val Kilmer playing the antagonist in this film. He ain't the villain, but he's the antagonist to Tom Cruise's protagonist. Man, this was the film that really announced him to the world, as well as Tom Cruise. They became movie stars at this point. They were actors before this movie. After Top Gun, they became movie stars. And when you think back on this film, in 2025 eyes, and you think of Tom Cruise and his status right now and how he's pretty much the last real movie star left on planet Earth, and who can go toe to toe with Tom Cruise? And Tom Cruise has starred in countless films and has went up against countless villains and antagonists. But there's only one who truly could stand toe to toe on screen with Tom Cruise, and that was Val Kilmer. Val Kilmer as Iceman was like the perfect foil for Maverick. You know what I'm saying? It was, I loved it, man. And it's a shame that those two weren't in more films together, because I think they could have really made magic as a pair. I'm not saying they could have been in a little bootleg Lethal Weapon spinoff or something like that as buddy cops or nothing like that, but just be in a film together because they played off of each other so well. Honestly, because I haven't seen Tom Cruise, play off of anybody as well as he did with Val Kilmer. Those two were meant to make films together, and unfortunately, we didn't get that. But it's all good. We can always go back and watch this classic of a film. Top Gun lands at number 5 on Val Kilmer's top 10 list. Coming in at number 4 is, man, I mean, come on. I know he's not the star of this film. I know that the film is not centered around his character. He doesn't play, well, he does play a major role in it, but he's not the one you're really following throughout this film. But the film itself, this film doesn't work if everybody's not involved. if everybody is not bringing 100%. And Val Kilmer definitely brought 100% in his role in Heat. Heat is number 4 on the list. Heat is one of the best heist films, crime films, whatever you want to call it, of all time. Robert De Niro, Al Pacino. I mean, come on, bro. Michael Mann directed this film. The hands down the greatest shootout in film history. What a movie. This movie was awesome. I love the story with Val Kilmer's character and Ashley Judd's character in here. Really good little subplot that we had going on in this film. But Val Kilmer was awesome in it. Everybody was awesome in it. I really don't know what to say about it, but it's definitely a top 5 film for Val Kilmer. This is, I mean, yeah, of course. Did he play a major part into why it's as great as it is? Well, not major part, but he did play a part, and he played an awesome role in here. The dynamic between him and Robert De Niro was great. I love to see those two paired off. I mean, it was just great, man. This movie was awesome. Still is awesome. And Heat lands at number 4 on the top 10 Val Kilmer films and performances. We're in the top 3, people, and coming in at number 3 is a film that came out a couple of years ago, and it is none other than the documentary Val. Yeah, man. I mean, I had to put it at number 3. I had to put it up there. It's a film that documents his journey, through this treacherous world of Hollywood, and it was a well done doc. It was a doc that he videoed himself. He had a video camera on set. He videoed himself behind the scenes and all this here. And it really shined a light on what I was talking about earlier about him being difficult on set. And a lot of that stuff, this documentary debunks, how he was on set. Now, it doesn't show every second of him on set, but it does debunk the fact that he was just this malcontent because he was getting along with cast members and directors and producers while his video was rolling. So it's really informative. It was a nice journey to go on. Some of the sets that he was on, some of the films that I mentioned here already, so it was a good doc, and I highly recommend it in tribute to Val Kilmer to check out Val. It's a good documentary, really good documentary. I need to go back and watch it again. I watched it when it first came out a couple of years ago, and I enjoyed it then, and I plan to go back and watch it now as a tribute, but it's worth it. It won't be a chore. It's really worth it. It's well done, well produced, and it was good to kind of get a peek behind the curtain of the man that we know as Val, which comes in at number 3. Coming in at number 2, and this is weird, but bear with me. Coming in at number 2, Top Gun Maverick. And look, I know, Kevin, he was only in one scene. I know. I know. But the reason I'm putting this at number 2, that scene, that one scene that he was in, hits so different today. It hit when it hit. When the movie came out, I was emotional in the theater when I watched it. That scene with him and Tom Cruise. And even though he can't speak, even though, at that stage, because he had throat cancer, that's why his career kind of slowed down towards the end, because he had throat cancer and his ability to speak was pretty much diminished. And he still held that charisma, that presence on screen. It was so powerful. I just can't. And when he did speak, when he did talk to Maverick in that scene and asked him who's the best pilot, which was a throwback to the original film. And I mean, Niagara Falls, man, Niagara Falls. And then for his character later on in the film to pass away. Oh man, it hits so different today, and it was such a beautiful tribute. It's like they knew. It's like the filmmakers knew this was going to be his last film, and unbeknownst to them, I guess it it turned out to be his last film. Man, this was so good, and it hurt so bad. But it was beautifully done. It wasn't sappy. It wasn't corny. It wasn't cheesy. It was done with so much honor, so much respect to that character and to the actor. I can't do anything but put it at number 2, Top Gun Maverick. Awesome, awesome that they did this. Shout out to Tom Cruise for doing, because he didn't. I mean, think about it. Tom Cruise didn't have to do that for Val Kilmer for that movie. Because quite honestly, they didn't need him in that movie. I mean, they didn't need that character in that movie. But that was a love letter. That was something to really just give him his flowers, and it was sweet. It was beautiful, and I loved how they did it. That comes in at number 2. At number 1, and this is a no-brainer if you're a Val Kilmer fan. This is a no-brainer if you are a friend of Kevin Reed. This is hands down the greatest Val Kilmer performance of all time, if not one of the best performances, period, of all time, in my humble opinion. It's subjective here. I know this film isn't the greatest. You know, I made that disclaimer earlier. All the films aren't the greatest here, but I loved his performance in the films. This film may not have been the greatest, but his performance was the greatest performance I have ever seen out of Val Kilmer. And it is none other as his portrayal as Doc Holliday in Tombstone. Number 1 of the top 10 Val Kilmer films. I'm your Huckleberry. Yeah, you know, I mean, come on. He has the most quotable lines in that film. I mean, everything about his performance, his southern drawl, his, Doc Holliday being sickly throughout the film, the cough, the pale complexion that he had, the cockiness of his character because he's this quick draw, and but his friendship, his love for Wyatt Earp in this film, it was beautiful. I loved his performance. I mean, you have Kurt Russell in this movie as Wyatt Earp. You have this was a stacked cast. You had Bill Paxton, you got Michael Biehn, you have Powers Booth, you have Stephen Lang. The list goes on and on. This was a stacked cast, and anybody could have stole this movie, but it was Val Kilmer at the end of the day that stole this movie. They should have named this movie Doc Holliday. It shouldn't have been Tombstone. Val Kilmer stole this movie. I mean, he should have went to jail for armed robbery. It was he stole it. Man, that character was so gangster. The showdown with him and Michael Bihn's character, I forgot his name, when he said, "Oh, we got some unfinished business." Oh, Michael Biehn told him, "Oh, my beef ain't with you," because everybody was scared of Doc Holliday because of his reputation. And you're like, "Oh, my beef ain't with you." Oh, well, my beef's with you, and we got unfinished business. And Michael Biehn was like, "Oh, I was just fooling around," and Val Kilmer delivered this line so cold, it sent chills up my spine. I'm getting goosebumps right now thinking about it. When Michael Biehn said, "Oh, I was just fooling around," and Val Kilmer, without blinking, without just a tick on his face or nothing, he just delivered it. "I wasn't," and that was it. That's all he said. At that point, Michael Biehn was like, "Okay, all right, let's do it." He was like, because he knew at that point there is nothing else to talk about. There is nothing I can say to get out of this fight. This is it, and I'm probably gonna die because he has made his mind up. Today's the day. Now, before that scene, he was he being Doc Holliday was sick in the bed. He's close to death, but he knew that his friend Wyatt Earp was going to his death if he had to face Ringo. Yeah, Johnny Ringo. If he was going to face Johnny Ringo. But before he allowed that, before he laid there and allowed that to happen, he got up and went and killed Johnny Ringo before he was able to kill his one good friend. And it was just beautifully done. The movie, it was all right. It was all right. I epically remember my dad, who is a Western nut. God rest his soul. He did not like Tombstone. He didn't like it when it came out, and I get it, because my dad, he's been watching or at least he was watching westerns his whole life, and that life spanned 70 some odd years. So he knows a little bit about a little bit when it comes to cowboy movies. So he didn't like this movie, but I get it, but I loved it. I just loved Val Kilmer. If you talk Tombstone, if you go to anybody and talk about Tombstone, the first thing out of their mouth is probably going to be Val Kilmer, Doc Holliday, I'm Your Huckleberry. That is epic. That is something I'm probably going to get ingrained on my tombstone. I'm Your Huckleberry for years. Even recently, I think I said it. I dropped that nugget. That was a known quote of mine. If somebody would talk trash or something like that, especially when I was on the basketball court back in the day, not today, but back in the day, you couldn't drag me on a basketball court now. But would they be talking trash and yada yada yada? I'm like, well, I'm your Huckleberry. Let's go. That was my tagline, and it came from this film. It came out of the lips of Val Kilmer. Val Kilmer's best performance, in my humble opinion, Doc Holliday in the Western Tombstone. So that's my top 10 Val Kilmer films. Just to run back through them. At number 10, Batman Forever. At number 9, Top Secret. At number 8, Willow. At number 7, Real Genius. At number 6, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. Number 5, Top Gun. Number 4, Heat. Number 3, Val. Number 2, Top Gun Maverick. And at number 1, Tombstone. R.I.P. to a king, man. I mean, rest in peace to a legend, Val Kilmer. You will be missed, but rest assured, he will never be forgotten. He has left us some amazing, amazing films to always go back and still watch a piece of his legacy. I would love to know, what is your favorite Val Kilmer film? What is your favorite performance of Val Kilmer? And how did you think he did as Batman? Did you think he did a good job? I would love to know that, because when I tell people that, I've been telling people that for years, since that movie came out, that, yeah, I liked his Bruce Wayne. And people look at me like I got 4 eyes, or 7 eyes on my face. It's like, huh? Yeah, I liked it. But not the movie, but I liked him. But I would love to know your favorite Val Kilmer performance. Email the show, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. You can also search for the show on all social media platforms. Just search for the KB Radio Network. Don't forget about YouTube, ladies and gentlemen. If you're on YouTube right now, subscribe to the KB Radio Network channel and like this video. Pretty please. Don't forget about the 5 stars, the reviews, and sharing this show if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you are currently listening to Movie Goodness here on the KB Radio Network. Everybody, thank you for joining me as we pay tribute to a legend, in my humble opinion, the late, great Val Kilmer. Want you all to know that I love you. Continue to love everyone. And until we speak again, I'm your Huckleberry, and you be blessed.